The wild waste Tail's widow stood at the edge of the cabin, her hands trembling as the flickering candlelight danced across the wooden walls. Years of loneliness and loss weighed heavily on her shoulders, and tonight, something in the air felt different. The cowboy, tall and rugged, had always been a silent presence on the ranch, watching over the land with quiet determination. But tonight, he stepped closer, his eyes soft yet steady, offering a comfort she hadn't felt in years. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Don't stop, I need this," revealing a longing for trust, warmth, and protection she had denied herself for too long. The wind howled through the open plains outside, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the distant faint aroma of smoke from a neighboring homestead. Inside the cabin, the widow, heart raced, her pulse matching the crackling rhythm of the fire. She had spent many nights alone in this place, the walls a mute witness to her grief and determination to survive. The loss of her husband had left her cautious, guarded, and weary of trusting anyone again. Yet there was something about the cowboy's presence that cut through her barriers, a quiet steadiness that whispered of safety and understanding. He reached out slowly, placing a calloused hand over hers. She felt the warmth of his skin seep into her own, and a shiver of anticipation ran through her. His eyes never left hers, steady and unwavering, reflecting a patience that she hadn't realized she needed. "I've watched over this place for a long time," he said softly, voice low and roughened by years of labor and sun. "I never thought I'd find someone worth standing this close to." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that made her chest tighten. She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The firelight danced across his face, illuminating the faint lines of hardship and experience, the sharp jaw softened by the gentleness in his gaze. She felt a mix of fear and longing, a pull towards something that promised care, yet demanded vulnerability. Years of self-reliance had taught her to face hardship alone, but tonight she found herself leaning into the possibility of companionship. There was a strange courage in admitting she needed someone like him, someone willing to stand silently beside her in the dark. The cowboy took a step closer, bridging the small distance between them. His hand remained on hers, steady and reassuring, and she felt the strength behind it, a solidity that had been missing from her life since her husband's passing. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You never did." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. The firelight seemed to grow warmer, as if the cabin itself recognized the fragile trust forming between them. For a long moment, they simply stood together, listening to the wind outside and the quiet settling of the cabin around them. The widow felt the tension in her body soften, her shoulders releasing some of the weight she had carried for so long. She dared a small smile, the first genuine one in months, and he returned it with a faint nod, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. In the flickering pain felt distant, as if the cabin walls had absorbed the grief and were now offering a reprieve. He moved a little closer, guiding her to sit on the edge of the small, worn couch that had long served as her solitary companion. She allowed herself to lean back, the firelight casting a soft halo around them both. "It's been a hard road," he said quietly, "but sometimes, even in the middle of nowhere, people find each other." She let the words sink in, feeling the warmth of possibility bloom in her chest. It was more than comfort. It was hope, tentative but real, like the first rays of sunlight over the prairie. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the cabin floor as they sat together. He spoke of the ranch, of the animals he tended, and of life on the plains, painting a picture of the harsh yet beautiful world they inhabited. She listened intently, finding herself drawn into his stories, laughing softly at small anecdotes and feeling a connection that transcended words. The loneliness that had defined her life for so long began to ebb, replaced by a sense of companionship and shared purpose. Hours passed unnoticed, the wind outside relentless but distant in their shared warmth. She realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about what had been lost, but about what might still be gained. The cowboy's presence was steady, comforting and unwavering, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had filled her life since she had become a widow. In his quiet company, she felt a fragile sense of safety, a willingness to let someone care for her in return. As the fire burned low, he helped her to her feet, guiding her to the small bed in the corner of the cabin. She felt a strange mixture of nervousness and relief, realizing that allowing herself to trust him was not a weakness, but a step toward healing. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent promise that she was not alone, that her life could still hold warmth and connection. She leaned into the gesture, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his hand. The widow closed her eyes, letting herself breathe in the security of the moment. For so long, she had survived on her own, facing hardship and solitude with grit and determination. Tonight, though, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to accept the comfort and steady presence of the cowboy. In the flickering candlelight, surrounded by the quiet of the plains and the rustic charm of the cabin, she felt a small but profound shift in her heart. When she finally looked up, his eyes met hers with a gentleness that spoke volumes. "Rest now," he murmured, guiding her to sit on the bed. "Tomorrow is another. Long day, but tonight you don't have to face it alone." She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek, not of sorrow but of relief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to trust, and to believe that even in the harsh expanse of the Wild West, moments of warmth and human connection were possible. The night stretched on, the fire burning low and shadows dancing across the cabin walls. Outside, the prairie was vast and unforgiving, but inside, a fragile sanctuary had formed, a place of quiet trust, shared presence, and the beginning of healing. The widow felt the strength of the cowboy beside her, the steadiness of his gaze, and the unspoken promise that she would no longer face the long nights alone. In that candlelit cabin, life and hope intertwined, leaving her with the sense that perhaps, just perhaps, happiness could be found even in the most unexpected corners of the world. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the worn furniture and rough-hewn walls. The cowboy held her gently, careful not to overwhelm her, letting her lean into his strength. She felt a sense of safety and connection, emotions she thought were long buried. Their hands brushed, and a silent understanding passed between them. This was more than fleeting comfort. It was a shared moment of healing, of trust rebuilt piece by piece. Outside, the night stretched endlessly, but inside the cabin time seemed to pause. For the first time in years, the widow felt truly seen, truly cared for, and a fragile hope began to bloom. The wind outside howled against the cabin walls, rattling the windows and sending a chill through the room. But inside, the warmth of the fire and the presence of the cowboy made the world outside fade away. She could hear the soft creak of the floorboards beneath their feet as he shifted slightly, giving her space, yet maintaining a closeness that spoke of unspoken understanding. She felt her heart slow, the racing fear of loneliness tempered by the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. In this small cabin, in the middle of nowhere, they had created a sanctuary of trust and shared vulnerability. He guided her to a small wooden chair by the fire, helping her settle comfortably without breaking the fragile connection they had formed. She looked around the cabin, noticing the small details that had previously escaped her notice. The hand-carved shelf filled with jars of preserved food, the faded photographs pinned to the walls, the worn tools resting in the corner. Each object told a story, a testament to years of hard work and resilience. And in the presence of the cowboy, those stories seemed to merge with her own, weaving a tapestry of shared endurance and silent companionship. As the firelight danced across the room, they spoke quietly of life on the plains, of the harshness of the 1800s frontier, and of dreams that had been deferred or abandoned. He told her of the long days tending cattle, but by the quiet dignity in his voice, the patience in his gestures, and the steadfastness that marked him as a man shaped by hardship yet softened by empathy. Each word built a bridge between them, shortening the distance wrought by years of solitude. She found herself sharing pieces of her own story, the grief that had shadowed her since her husband's passing, the lonely nights spent staring at the ceiling, and the tentative hope that perhaps someone else could enter her life without causing more pain. His eyes remained fixed on hers, never judgmental, always attentive, absorbing her words with an intensity that made her feel valued and understood. For the first time in a long while, she felt the courage to believe that companionship could be gentle, patient, and nurturing rather than overwhelming or demanding. Hours passed in quiet conversation and shared laughter, the kind that comes only when walls of isolation begin to crumble. She marveled at the simplicity of the moment, the way a shared fire, a pair of hands brushing, and the sound of someone else's breathing could create a depth of intimacy she had never expected. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, dark and silent. But inside, the cabin was alive with the quiet hum of connection, of trust forged slowly and carefully, of hearts recognizing one another in their shared longing for warmth and security. As midnight approached, he suggested they rest, helping her to the small bed tucked in the corner of the cabin. She hesitated at first, unused to allowing someone so close to her in such an intimate space. But his gentle persistence and the sincerity in his eyes made her relax. She let him guide her, and once she was Ted, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and relief. Here, in this rugged cabin, surrounded by the vast wilderness of the Wild West, she felt a sense of home she had thought she would never experience again. Before sleep claimed them, they sat side by side, listening to the wind sweep across the plains, feeling the warmth of the fire ebb and flow. The widow realized that life, even in the harshest conditions, could offer moments of profound connection and quiet joy. She had braced herself for isolation, for nights filled with memories and longing, but now she had a companion, someone who could stand with her through the trials of frontier life. In that moment, the Wild West seemed less daunting, and hope felt tangible, like the embers of the fire waiting to ignite into something enduring. When dawn finally broke, the cabin was bathed in pale golden light. The widow awoke to find the cowboy still at her side, eyes bright with quiet reassurance. The fire had dwindled to glowing coals, and the sounds of the plains filled the space around them. The distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of the wind through the fragile promise and the faint cry of a hawk second chances. She felt a sense of they would face the challenges of the frontier and building a life shaped not just by survival but by care, trust, and the quiet power of human connection. The days that followed were filled with work, laughter, and the small joys of routine life on the ranch. They mended fences together, tended to the horses, and shared stories by the fire each night. The widow learned to trust the rhythm of the cowboy's world, while he, in turn, found joy in her presence and resilience. Each moment, small and unassuming, was a thread in the growing tapestry of their lives together. In the rugged, unforgiving landscape of the 1800s Wild West, they had found warmth, companionship, and the beginnings of a love built on patience, understanding, and mutual respect.